Very good. Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Public, please hold comments until the select board chairman opens the agenda items for public comment. When addressing the board, state your full name, both in person and on Zoom. It is suggested that you enter your full name as your ID on Zoom as well. Minutes. I will take a motion to approve the minutes of January 2nd, 2024.
So moved.
So Martha, when we do this on Zoom, could you state your name?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Martha
Well-
Dudgeon, so moved.
Thank you, Martha.
Second,
And that's Rick.
All in
Yeah.
favor?
who's taking minutes? Is that
Heidi's
on Zoom?
on.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, so it was Rick was the second, Heidi.
Okay, all in favor?
Rick, aye.
Martha, aye.
John, aye.
Wendy is abstaining.
Jeff, you need to unmute.
Thank you. Jeff says aye.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're going to move down to unfinished business and take care of a few items. The first item I'd like to cover is the request, item B, request extension for the enforcement of accrual maximums to June 30, 2024 for all employees, including those within a bargaining unit.
We have Zach Harris on the line. He'll speak to that.
Okay.
Yep, this is Zach. So previously, this request was submitted to basically sunset the accrual maximums on December 31st. With bargaining unit negotiations opening up in January and receiving that notice, I believe was that in December, Derlin, you may be able to correct me, but
Yeah.
around December, it doesn't align well with having productive negotiations with our bargaining unit. And the proposal is to shift the sunset to June 30th. In addition to this, the thought with sunsetting these accrual maximums is to also roll out an accrual cash out policy, which was previously brought to the board. That policy is not yet ready, so it needs some fine tuning before it is rolled out to our employee population, which is the reason for the request.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Should we wait for a motion or can I ask a question?
Well, yeah, let's do a motion in a second first.
Okay.
This is Jeff Wood. I'd move that we extend the enforcement of the accrual maximums to June 30th as suggested.
Martha Dudgeon, seconds.
Okay, go ahead, Wendy.
So this is only the accrual of time. It doesn't have anything to do with like the fact that they're still in negotiations once the town meeting has happened? Like as far as monies and stuff like that? This is just the accrual issue, right?
Yeah, let me further explain. Accruals were the caps. We have caps in place on accruals. Those accruals were not enforced during COVID time, which resulted in accruals being above this max. At this point, if we were to start the enforcement of that max, a pretty large portion of our employees, including the bargaining unit, would be impacted on the enforcement of said max. And we wanted to roll out a cash out policy to help minimize any impact that was had on employees, but that policy is not yet ready. So due to that, and not wanting to unnecessarily harm employees, a further extension is warranted.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
This is Rick. I have a comment or a couple of comments.
Yep.
The first is that historically, for several years, we ended up getting into a problem where 4 or 5 town employees ended up accruing so much time that it became ridiculous and the select board had to deal with a plan in order to bring them into compliance. I think, Derlin, you came up with a timeline that recognized what the problem was, and moving it to June 30th or July 1 of the end year, brought it in line with the fiscal year for the town, which made it easier to manage financially in presenting a budget rather than having it fragmented in between. So, following that historical perspective that you established for those 5 employees that were outliers of the town for a while, and they were essential personnel who they just couldn't afford to take time off. It worked out very well for the town. It worked out well for them. Everyone was treated fairly and it was recognized. If this is an issue now because we overlooked something with regard to the accrual of sick time or any other paid leave, then I would wholeheartedly support keeping it or moving it to June, the end of June, so it is consistent with the budgeting process.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Rick says aye.
Jeff Wood says aye.
John McCauley says aye.
Wendy Littlefield says aye.
Martha Dudman says aye.
Thank you all.
Thank
Zach,
you.
I'll be in touch with you in a day or so.
Yep, thank you.
I want to just follow up a little bit with the unions, because I haven't heard them say that they're ready to go with a date yet, but when that happens, we know that Rick is on that committee. And so then we'll be getting together our team, our legal team, our HR team, our select board team, in order to come up with a great contract for the town and for the union. So,
Okay. All right, we all set?
we're set on that one, thank you, and Mr. Musson, I think, is next.
Yes, item A, review of proposed short-term rental ordinance. I would like to stress that this is not a public hearing, so comments from the public, we'd like to keep those to a minimum at this point, where the board is just having a chance to review this at this time.
And this is Jeff Wood. I would love to just address this. I missed the last meeting, unfortunately, I had a family situation, but I sent the board out a bulleted summary of what the ordinance is and isn't. And I wasn't there for the last time it was discussed, but I would love to run through that if you can all see it, or if it can be shared, I could share it.
That'd be great, Jeff.
Well, I don't know if I have permission to share, but I can try. And I can do that, maybe. Oh my goodness. Give me a second.
Have to make sure to have the document open first.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't that. I'm using a school computer, and they had it locked down so that I couldn't do it. Can you see it now?
Nope.
Nope. All right. All right. Okay. Huh. Oh my goodness. Well, let me log into my other computer then. This is,
Doesn't Derlin has a copy of it, doesn't
yes,
he?
he does.
Yeah, he should be able to share that.
So is that what we're gonna do then?
Well, I don't
Yeah.
have it with. Well,
Well, you have it in your email, right?
it'll be somewhere in my email, yeah.
Let me try one more time here.
Perfect.
Ah, there.
Okay.
Good
So
work.
now I can't see anybody, but that's okay.
You're
So
not missing much.
okay then. And I can't see the top of it. So this is just a bulleted summary of what the ordinance is, and the proposed rental ordinance and the team who put it together, which would include Martha and myself and Derlin and Noel, talked at length about trying to respond to the concerns, some of which came up last year, and and many the housing crisis, nor is it intended to unduly restrict people's ability to continue to practice what has long been a tradition on this island. What it does is it identifies and differentiates two distinct types of rental properties. And those two types are properties that serve as a primary residence and also are rented short term. And those are going to be called short-term rentals in this proposed ordinance. And then the second category of properties that do not serve as a primary residence and are also rented short term. And short term is 30 days or less. And those are going to be called vacation rentals. It provides for the town the ability to become aware of how many and what type of rental properties do exist in Mount Desert. It provides for any and all who currently own and rent their properties to continue to do so. Again, anyone who currently rents their home in whatever capacity, whether it's their primary residence or not, will be able to continue to do so exactly as they have, provided that they continue to renew their licenses. It provides for the funding of a needed position for the code enforcement office to assist the CEO and also to manage the monitoring and licensing processes for rental properties. It attempts to limit the extent to which potential residential properties are sold as investments in the future by capping the percent of properties in town which are eligible to be licensed as vacation rentals. However, all current vacation rentals are grandfathered, and there's a process in there where it could be passed down through the family. So nobody's going to lose their opportunity to continue to do what they've always done. What it doesn't do, it doesn't require the homeowner to be on the premises, which was a discussion at one time. It does not set a minimum number of nights or restrict how an owner chooses to market and or tailor their rental property to their own standards. It does not require an inspection, provided the owner attests to the meeting of local building codes and safety standards. It does not require a sign at the end of your driveway or in your front yard, which was apparently some places have done. And it does not impact whether or not a resident is allowed to build on their current property to add potential short-term rental units. So that's what it does, and that's what it doesn't do. As far as and I'm happy to go further, or Noel's there to field specific questions, and that's what I've got.
Thank you. Excellent. Noel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a few quick things. I think that this is a great draft. Put a lot of work into listening to the things that people said throughout the last process that we've been going through. A few things that we may want to consider, some thoughtful comments from the code enforcement officer, which may necessitate a few tweaks, but not substantive tweaks, but in the language in terms of making sure that we use the proper terminology like code enforcement department, which would be reflective of the future potential to have more than one employee in the code enforcement department. And some other research, which I still need to go over with Jeff and Martha a little bit more. The idea that there may also be a way to differentiate between something called, we'll call it like a seasonally restricted cottage. So those cottages that were only ever seasonal uses and not year-round uses at all may be able to be kind of worked into this provision. I haven't worked out all the details. We haven't actually discussed it, but I know that was something that has popped up in the past. And I've just recently found some language that we may want to consider. So I'm just going to throw that out there before anybody brings it up, is that is something that we haven't discussed, but we might want to discuss. Other than that, I'm happy to try to answer any more technical questions.
I have a question or a concern, I guess, that received a letter by email from town manager that it was sent to him to be shared with the board, that raised some concerns about identifying a certain percentage, and that it had undergone legal scrutiny in several states across the country. And was deemed by, I don't know whether it was state Supreme Courts or the US Supreme Court, to not be constitutional. And I think it would serve us well to look into where that fits with our proposed ordinance before going forward with something that may or may not be unconstitutional.
Sure. Yeah, I haven't seen that letter, but I think it would, we've already started to review this with the town's attorney, so we should bring that up with them. Yep, and other towns actually already do that in Maine, so we're not the only town in Maine that restricts.
Right.
Based on a percentage of that, so.
And if I may, I think that I don't know that it had already been decided, but I mean, as is expected, there are certainly cases being, well, I guess there was in one in Texas and one in North Carolina that were according to the letter, but there are always going to be challenges, and when challenges are met, we either, you know, meet them with our argument, or we succumb to the decision that was made somewhere else and change the path. I think the point was that we honestly do not know exactly how many like eligible residences are owned as investment properties. What we do have concerns about is the potential that too many homes that could be part of the housing stock end up being sold off to people who don't intend to use them as residences. That said, anybody who's currently owns an investment property is more than welcome to continue to do what they do. And we're not attempting to, or we would not be attempting to cull that number. Our hope is that maybe we'll find out that our suspicions are completely off, and that the 9% is not anywhere close to where we are. But perhaps we'll find that we're much higher than that, and we will hope, as Bar Harbor did, that through attrition over time, that number will come down, so that we can maintain the eligible stock of residences.
Yeah. Also, I believe that in the wording of the LUZO, it indicates that if any portion of it is found to be unconstitutional, it does not invalidate the other items in the ordinance.
That is correct, John. My only point is that it would be prudent for us going forward to ensure, to the best of our abilities, that we minimize any contests that may arise.
Yep.
And one has raised its possible existence already before we even put this to the voters, that perhaps we ought to look into it and try to avoid a challenge if we can.
Yep.
That's
I
fair.
agree. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Any further comments from the board? Okay, hearing none. Listen, Jeff, Martha,
Yes.
Thank you so much for the work you've put into this. Thank you, Noel. It looks like we're finally going to be making some progress.
And
Great.
Martha, don't forget about Martha.
I said Martha.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Are you trying to stir up trouble over there?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I do.
All right. So let's move back up to the appointments, recognitions, and resignations. Okay. I would entertain a motion to recognize the promotion of Mike Vollmer to Mechanical Equipment Operator 2, effective January 15, 2024.
This is Rick. I move recognition.
This is Wendy. I second that.
All in favor?
Rick says aye.
Wendy says aye.
Jeff says aye.
Martha says aye.
And John says aye. Thank you. Consent agenda, department reports, Public Works, Highway, Buildings and Grounds, Solid Waste, and Shellfish Conservation Committee Management Plan.
This is Rick, and I move the consent agenda be accepted as presented.
Martha seconds.
Okay, any discussion there? Anyone want to pull anything out? Do we have a representative from the Shellfish Committee here?
Claire's here.
Claire, we're pretty
Sorry, I couldn't unmute.
Okay, so I noticed that we basically open up our flats to just about everybody. Is that true? They just have,
Yes, well, there is an allocation that is approved by the state where we have one commercial license that is available for a non-resident. And then we have 9 resident commercial licenses. And our ordinance states that any resident commercial licenses unsold after 90 days is opened up to non-residents for a commercial license.
okay, do you know
But
if
there would
that's,
never, I'm sorry, there would never be more than 10 commercial licenses. And
okay,
then you have the recreational licenses.
which are for residents only, correct?
Well, no, they're unlimited for residents, and the first 10 non-residents are a 1-to-1. So for every resident one sold, a non-resident can buy one. After the 10, then it goes to, I believe it's 5 resident licenses have to be sold for each non-resident license. But in the last several years, going back before COVID, we have not sold that many licenses. Apparently there's not, how to word this, there's not a great deal of resources available. So people are not buying the licenses like they used to.
Okay. My basic question was just whether or not we are as generous or not generous as our neighbors. Our neighbor in town.
I don't know that, but this is, I guess, almost, I want to say as long, and it's been about 20 years that we've had the ordinance, that this has been our standard allocation that's approved every year. But at our next meeting, we could check into that.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I'd like to know that.
Okay.
Great. Okay, anybody have anything else they want to add? Okay, all in favor?
Martha votes aye.
Rick votes aye.
Jeff votes aye.
John McCauley votes aye.
And Wendy votes aye.
Okay, thank you, guys. Any select board reports?
I just wanted, I saw a nice note from Derlin to the people of the town, who people work for the town who did such a good job with the storm damage. Derlin, if you could give us sort of an update on where we stand, what kind of damage the town has suffered, and what the plan is for remediation.
I think I'll defer a little of that to Mike, who's been collecting some of that damage information. I do know anecdotally, John said that the marina took about a $400,000 hit in damage. And there were some others, some of the buildings, and Brian, you said that there was a little damage around some of the wastewater.
Some roadways and some on the Seal Harbor Pier and the restroom there.
Yeah. So we took the brunt of it. I think, wouldn't you say Seal Harbor was the hardest hit of any of the villages? Probably,
Yeah.
Or maybe
I-
the marina here.
Yeah, this is Mike Bender. I would say probably Seal Harbor was the hardest hit from what I can see so far. Mostly due to the storm surge over there. There was some damage to the beach area, sidewalk, damage to the Seal Harbor Pier, also the pump station down there. And then there's some damage on the other side of Harbor from Dodge Point, some of it private, some of it municipal. And then the remaining damage from my tell was in Northeast Harbor. I did file for well, it's a first assessment of damage with the FEMA through the Hancock County MMA. I did file that today, and so far, these figures are gonna probably either go up or down. This is just a rough estimate, but so far, we're looking at about $152,400 worth of damage to municipal property.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank
So
you.
I know I know that there are lots of a lot of individuals that have commercial interests in the water. And everyone's clamoring to know how to file for assistance. And my understanding is that MEMA is gathering data first, so we know what kind of numbers that, you know, the governor wants to ask for from the feds. So, but we also have a lot of individuals that don't have access to internet and don't have the wherewithal to report the damage that they might have experienced. And I was wondering if we have a plan to make available to residents a way for them to either come to the library or town office or something to make that connection online.
John,
Yes.
this is Claire. So, we in the town clerk's office did print that information that was sent out by Andrew Sankey, and have that available for residents that wish to come in. And there's some phone numbers they can call to make their reports that way. And then I guess, I don't know, Derlin, is there something we can do about setting up maybe a laptop or something for people to access in the lobby area to report?
I don't see why we couldn't do something like that.
Yeah, you could, if you want, you can also offer myself as assistance or assisting anybody that would need it. I can probably point them in the right direction. And
Okay.
I can get with the county EMA director too, see if we can find alternative methods for these individuals to file.
All right,
Okay.
very good.
Who is that speaking just now?
Mike Bender.
Mike, that was Mike. Okay, thanks.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. We'll see what happens. All right, very good. Anybody else have anything to say on that issue? Nope. Okay, unfinished business. Item C, because we've already done item A and B. Consider the approval of additional authorization of the use of $1,425.23 from the town office building reserve account 405-0100-24570 for window replacement.
This is Rick and I move approval.
This is Jeff, and I second.
All in favor?
Jeff
Rick
says
says
aye.
Aye. John McCauley says aye.
Wendy Littlefield says aye.
Martha says aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Item D, proposal for enhanced law enforcement services in Tremont.
This is Chiefs here.
Yes.
Is Dave here? Yep.
This is David Kearns. So I think you get a memo. We're really in the beginning stages of this, but we just kind of wanted you guys to be aware and voice any concerns at this level. From the memo, you see that they've kind of reached out to us, knowing that what we have working in place with our two towns seems to be preferred. And so they're just kind of scrambling to get that 24-hour coverage service that they're looking for with the sheriff's department and the state police, where they just kind of not fitting their needs at the moment. So.
Okay.
So,
Oh, go ahead, Martha.
so are you're gonna come up with a proposal for them and then they're gonna consider it? Is that how it's going?
Yeah, so at this point, Jesse Dunbar, the town manager there, has asked for an official proposal from us that they'll actually be taken to town meeting and then ballot vote based upon what we give them for proposal. So anything that we're gonna come up with at this point, based upon how we're operating with the two towns, Bar Harbor and Mount Desert, we have a minimum staffing level of 3. And just based on state mandated policies on domestic violence response and some other stuff, which always requires a 2-officer response, that would really, if we had something that happened in Tremont where we would have to send 2 of our officers, say on a midnight shift, that would leave 1 officer covering both Bar Harbor and Mount Desert. And I told them that I didn't think either community would have an appetite for that level of service for our two towns to supplement Tremont. So this is really probably an additional 4 more officers. that they'll end up covering the entire, cost of moving forward with the proposal. So,
Okay, my concern, Dave, is that we're gonna have these 4 new hires.
Yep.
I think you said 4. And then in 3 or 4 years, they're gonna decide they're gonna do something else. And we've got 3 or 4 positions that really are.
In addition to that, this is Jeff Wood speaking, what we have with Bar Harbor and Mount Desert happened because 2 towns that already had existing police departments decided to move together and operate one larger department, which works out well. This is a very, very different animal, and I think having. I guess I would want, if I were in your position, Chief, would want a lot of support in outlining what this could look like, should look like, might look like, because this is not a small question. This is a very large question, and long term, as John said, is significant. I'm real concerned, especially with Southwest Harbor still sort of not wanting to play along up to at this point, as far as I know. This is really a big deal.
Yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
I kind of agree with Jeff. With the proximity of Mount Desert and Bar Harbor being so close together and Tremont being, miles away from us. And then the square miles that we cover, like from Pretty Marsh to Northeast and then Bar Harbor, if we're skipping over Southwest Harbor, I have like concerns about the timeline of officers being available in, 3 different towns at any one given time. I understand their concern and I do think that there needs to be something, but I just feel without, the town in between being part of our, process, I just worry about what it does to our communities without officers.
I have less concern about that, Wendy. My question, Dave, is, are you going to be able to find those 4 officers?
That's a good question. That's something we talked with Tremont about, because they were looking to do something sooner rather than later. And the realistic timeline for us to hire 4 people and get them trained to serve our communities is probably not realistically on any near horizon. So I think that's something that we wanted to at least bring to you as the board. The town of Bar Harbor has the same memo that I gave to Derwin to pass along to you folks. So I think this really is a bigger question for our communities if this is something that we want to entertain. And the long-term approach, John, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think this is something that we would sign into a 1-year contract or something. I think this has to be well thought out and make sure that they understand that they're footing the bill for this increase in staff for us, and that we would be under no obligation if they broke a contract or decided not to continue services, that these are really employees that would be hired based upon this contract.
I want to add, assuming that you can find people to hire, work out all the kinks and come up with an agreement that makes sense to everyone. I'm in favor of it. If it's well structured, because I think all parts, this isn't that big an island, and all parts of it need to be safe for all of us to be safe. So I think having our fine police department overseeing a greater portion of the island would benefit all of us.
I'm in agreement with Martha on that.
I would say I am as well. And then looking at the geography, honestly, there's a fair amount of Tremont that's closer to Soamesville than it is to Southwest Harbor. But the the total coverage, it's just it's a global, more global than our little globe of MDI situation that I think is not going to be solved in the time frame that they're hoping.
No. It's gonna take a lot of work.
And it really, if it's going to work well, it's going to need to involve the Southwest Harbor PD.
Yeah.
That's my position, my perspective, anyway.
And those are discussions that we haven't had with, we did, this is years ago, had conversations with the former chief, Alan Brown, way back. That has since kind of passed, and we haven't had any further conversations with Southwest and what their plans are. But this is a request specifically from Tremont. We do share a border with Tremont. It is more of a sprawling area, I guess, if you're thinking about how it's laid out. And we would have to really think about how to logically split up our policing zones to make sure that coverage is adequate for Pretty Marsh, Soamesville, into the Town Hill area. Because right now that zone 3 for us is fairly large, but the call volume is really residential. Opposed to, in town, Northeast Harbor or Bar Harbor, where a lot of our call volume takes place. So, and I think we have a little bit more research to do as far as pulling data from the sheriff's department as well as the state police who are covering Tremont historically, as far as call volume goes. So we have a lot of work to do, and I would anticipate this will come back before we present anything further to Tremont. So we'll have more time to digest, but I guess looking for your opinion tonight of whether we consider to put our time into it at Tremont's request.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is. And I would just throw my hat into the ring, I guess, thinking that this is definitely a worthwhile endeavor to at least pursue, look at, and see what a fleshed out proposal would look like. And I agree with you that the amount of work it's going to take and the items that need to be looked at, whether they're patrol zones or call, you will, or going to a precinct model or whatever, definitely merits an effort to look at what it would look like. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. The question will never be answered if we don't jump in and figure this out. And the answer might be, this isn't going to work and here's why. And there might be 100 reasons why, or it might be just the opposite. I don't see the town of Bar Harbor and the town of Mount Desert being financially responsible to create this. Should it become something that looks like a glowing endeavor, it would be incumbent upon Tremont to open their purses and fund what it is they're asking for. However that may flesh out in terms of personnel, cruisers, radios, whatever, equipment, the works. So I think it's definitely a worthwhile endeavor to pursue, look at, and allow both Bar Harbor and Mount Desert to make an informed decision with regard to whether our joint police force goes forward. And I would offer my services, should they be of any value whatsoever, in terms of identifying administrative structure, command structure, how it would flesh out for different zones, and where would authority rest should new hires have questions in the middle of the night, things like that. So yeah, if there's anything that as a board member I can do to help, or just as a concerned citizen who spent a lot of years working for the state of Maine, could do to help. So I wholeheartedly support going forward with it.
Thank you. Okay. Any more thoughts? Okay, Darrell, where do we go with this? What do you want from us?
Well, I think we would look to you for guidance as whether Dave and his crew should be putting in the time to flesh out a proposal. Is there enough interest in seeing what this may look like? So I would ask for an endorsement or non-endorsement from the board as to whether or not he should spend a portion of his time putting together this requested proposal.
This is
This is-
Martha. I'm in favor of him exploring this.
As am I.
Good. Do I hear a motion?
Okay, yeah, please.
Move endorsement.
Second,
Okay,
Okay.
wait a minute. Rick
All in
was the-
favor?
Yeah, who is seconding? Please identify.
sorry, Jeff, I think it was me. Jeff Wood and seconded Rick's
Thank
motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Rick says aye.
Martha says aye.
Jeff Wood says aye.
John McCauley says aye.
Wendy Littlefield says aye.
Very good. Now we have
If I may, part of the reason I had no question about endorsing the further is just because of the level to which Chief Kearns has obviously considered this and is not going in blind, and I appreciate that.
It's worth looking into.
Thank you for your support, and I'll make sure that you guys are kept in full loop on what's going on, so,
Great. Thanks, Dave.
thank you.
Okay, new business, request authorization to release up to $9,850 from the Police Department Capital Reserve Account 4040100-24405 with a current unencumbered balance of $126,060.72 for the December 2023 cruiser purchase upfit and the decommission of cruiser 4113.
Rick
Jeff
moves
Wood,
authorization.
Jeff Wood seconds.
Right, any further discussion? Nope, all in favor?
Rick
Martha,
says aye.
Jeff Wood says aye.
John McCauley says aye.
Wendy Littlefield says aye.
I say aye again.
Thank you. They kind of got cut off. We weren't quite sure which way you.
It's hard
Thank
when
you very
we're
much.
on Zoom because you can't see people.
Yeah.
No, and I don't think
We
we're
We
oriented.
need an
this-
order.
Yeah,
All the roll.
We need a specific order so that we know when it's our
Go
turn.
Across the top. Rick,
Is it the
Rick,
same
Jeff.
for everybody?
yeah, I think it is. So clockwise, it goes Rick, Jeff, me, Martha, Wendy.
no, Wendy, Martha
Perfect.
on mine.
Clockwise, like on a clock face, or are you?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm with you, Martha. I'm after John.
yeah.
Ha, okay, never mind. We're not gonna waste any more time. Okay, item B, consideration of authorizing Fire Chief Mike Bender to purchase a new 2024 GMC Sierra 3500 HD crew cab pickup truck in the amount of $56,320 with said funds to be used from the Fire Department Equipment Reserve Account number 4040300-24471 with a current unencumbered balance of $863,423.92.
Rick moves authorization.
Jeff Wood seconds.
Okay, any discussion?
I have a question. In the narrative, it says you're gonna purchase it from Darling's Bangor Ford, but down below it says Varney.
Yes, if I could make a correction on the memo, I am requesting to purchase this vehicle from Barney,
Oh, Varney,
BOGMC.
okay.
Yes, please.
And I hate to be a curmudgeon about this, but this will be, I didn't see the detail anywhere. It's probably staring at me in the face. Will this be a hybrid vehicle or?
It will not. Ram, both Dodge, Chevy, and GMC do not make a 1-ton available.
Yeah,
Hybrid electric.
okay,
Right now, the only thing available to pickup truck are the half tons and hybrid or electric.
okay.
And then the only question I had is, you selected the GMC Sierra out of the three, but it appears that that's the highest price of the three that were in the list. And just why?
That's correct. By contacting all three dealers, the other two dealers were really not enthused in working with us. As you know, buying a vehicle in the private sector has changed. And it certainly has changed in the government purchase as well. The incentive for dealers to work with local government to purchase these vehicles or have these vehicles purchased from them is just not there anymore. The other two dealers could not give me a date on when these were available. And our truck right now, as I said in the memo, it won't pass inspection next year, so we're really under the gun to get this replaced, and the GMC was the only one that could be available right now.
Okay, that's
All right.
a reasonable response. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay. Any more comments? All in favor?
Rick says aye.
Jeff says aye.
John says aye.
Wendy says aye.
Martha says aye.
Very smooth. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Consideration of authorizing Fire Chief Mike Bender to purchase a new 2024 Ford E450 Super Duty ambulance in the amount of $370,749 with said funds to be used from the Fire Department Equipment Reserve account number 4040-300-24471 with a current unencumbered balance of $492,674.92.
Rick moves authorization.
Jeff seconds.
Great. Any discussion?
I just have one question. Is the 2018, like, do we sell that? Is it no good? What do we do with that?
Well, first of all, in the memo, I probably saw, this is gonna take about 3 years for this ambulance to build, so it's quite a ways out. With the agreement we have with the Northeast Harbor Ambulance, as soon as we're done with those ambulances that they donated, which includes the 2018, they have, first refusal, so we have to offer that vehicle back to them first. If they do not want that, then, we do have the option of trying to trade it in towards, this new ambulance.
Can I ask, I just noticed this also in the memo versus the motion, that one of them says 370,000, the other one says 307,000.
The 300 is correct.
Mm-hmm.
So 370,749.
Yes,
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
good.
thank you.
Great. Any more comments? Okay, all in favor?
Rick says aye.
Jeff Wood says aye.
John McCauley says aye.
Wendy Littlefield says aye.
Martha Dudman says aye.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, authorize Public Works Superintendent Ben Jacobs to publish a new 2025 International Cab and Chassis from Colwell Diesel for $105,000 with funds from the Public Works Equipment Reserve account number 4050100-24500 with an approximate unencumbered balance of $266,013.75.
Rick moves authorization.
Jeff Wood seconds.
Great. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Rick says aye.
Jeff Wood says aye.
John McCauley says aye.
Wendy Littlefield says aye.
Martha Dudman says aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, and our last official item, review of fiscal year 2025 budgets, public works and capital improvement plans.
And Brian is here to go over his budget, and again, I wrote you a memo kind of tying everything we've done together. And so what you will see once we're through is that you will review all the departmental budgets, do a final cut on the CIP, and you'll have the debt budget as well. So it's all kind of lined up, and turn it over to Brian.
I think, as we talked about when we first reviewed the CIP, we were gonna be shuffling things from the budget into the CIP and also to push to have CIP fully funded, and you'll see that reflected in the public works budget. There are items that have been zeroed out in terms of leases that we had in there. There were a number of leases that were kind of split 50-50. There were services that were being purchased that belong better in the CIP. Those have also moved out. And so you'll see that the overall budget is not significant change relative to last year, partly due to that. And you'll see in the CIP, as you look through that, there are significant increases there, but that is kind of a combination of a couple of things. It's that moving the money from that budget line. So that's a one-to-one match from one to the other. And then the other is to also move towards that fully funded on the CIP. And so there are increases there in order to ensure that we have the appropriate funding for replacing this equipment.
And there's also some from the police department doing the same thing around cruiser equipment and things.
So just so I understand, when that CIP is fully funded, would that mean that the funding for it every year would be flat? Is that how?
It would be flat except for perhaps, if there were going to be some significant increases for prices on equipment, like inflationary things, but as far as the piece of equipment, and if you changed the net value of the piece of equipment, yes, it would be flat. But if all of a sudden you had a
Right.
$100,000 item, which we now knows is going to be $150,000, then we would make that adjustment on that.
That wouldn't have, the CIP would have to be adjusted annually anyway, to some
Yes.
extent. Yeah,
But for the most part.
but it would smooth it out more.
Yeah, what it does is it takes off the peaks and the valleys.
Yeah,
It's
thank
sort
you.
of- I think it's sort of the gold standard of municipal budget, if you can get to a fully funded CIP. And we think this is the year to do it because we've had some pretty good tight budgeting out of the departments, and we've also had the good fortune, of course, the debt going down on that. So I think it's, this sort of like the year when everything comes together. This is what we've been working for, and all of a sudden, I think it's come to the point where we can make that final push.
Yeah.
And again, there was 3 items. There was Brian, some of his equipment went out of his operating budget over into the CIP. Some of Dave's cruiser equipment went over, and there were some of the items that May had identified that had been underfunded that we needed to push. So those are the 3 things causing the rise in the CIP. If you weren't happy with the CIP, some of that money though would have to go back out of the CIP and it would roll back into the departmental budgets on the 1-to-1. So if you cut them down, you wouldn't necessarily be cutting the expenses, you'd just be reallocating them back into operating budgets.
Yeah, ours.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, May.
Oh, I was going to say another significant increase or a factor in the increase is the fact that I added $173,000 worth of debt service budget savings and added that to the reserves in the CIP, which obviously increased the amount of reserves. Those were in the town meeting last year. It was approved that the debt service budget savings could be used to pay down or to put in the CIP to then decrease the costs of any future bond payments. So, I mean, so that's like 173,000 is a pretty significant chunk of that. And that's a wash, I mean, because that's just debt service budget and savings from the budget that we wouldn't, we're not paying any longer because we paid off those bonds.
So it would be shown as an expense and also as income, or how does that work?
No, so basically it's just the difference in the budgets from last year and this year.
Yeah.
Right. And so since we paid down we no longer have payments on bonds that have matured. We now have an extra, $173,000 that we do not have to pay towards bonds because they're retired, matured, and so that can be put back into the CIP to gain interest on it to be able to lower the price of payments that we do for any new issuance in the future.
I see. Thank you.
Can I ask, are we just scanning through and finding, I just wondered about the waste management increases and where we are regarding that, the saga of where our trash goes.
They're still moving forward with, working through the process of bringing that facility back online. They did
Right.
do something of that facility with a few towns contributing trash to it, at least some portions of it. This was quite a while ago. I think it was not long after it was purchased. And the testing was mostly geared towards the front of the facility, and that seemed to work well. And I think there's a certain amount of retooling that they want to do, and I've a ton of details about it and the way in which, once it's sorted and processed in the front, how is it then managed, whether it goes into, you know, whatever particular stream it goes into after that. They're still working through that. I think they've extended the timeline just a little bit, but it is moving forward, and that would be where we would be headed with trash and recycling once it becomes fully available.
And is there a thought on how that will impact our expenses and tipping fees and whatnot? Or is that not, or are we just gonna feel better about what's happening to the trash?
Right now, we're paying for the recycling, which would not be a component that we'd be paying for going forward. That's, if you recall back to a year ago, when we were going to town meeting, we had an overage in the public works budget that had to be approved through the town meeting. That overage was because recycling had been taken out because the plant had come online, and then had to be reinstated because the plant was not online. So that recycling is costing us money. And we would go back to that same scenario where, as long as that plant is operational, then we're not paying those extra recycling tipping fees, that it's all just going to the single facility and goes through, you know, one bin all in process.
Okay.
All right.
And one other just inquiry about it, doesn't amount to a huge amount of money, but the electricity actuals and budgeteds are strange in many places on this. Like, to me, they just, like, they went up quite a bit, and their actual was in I don't know, just a few places. Was there some change in the way we evaluate our electrical costs? Are we anticipating a huge amount of increase, or how did that play in?
Do you have an example, one that you could point to?
Yeah, there were 3 different places where I saw, if we look on line 126, electricity increase of 10%. It says 2024 actual 4373, budgeted 2025 16,500. And then there was a couple of other places similar to that. I mean, again, it's not a huge, I just was interested in I know we're moving towards some new things, but they're not anywhere near being helpful at this point. I just wondered if there was any.
Yeah, I did look at
like
a long. What's in the spreadsheet that you're looking at? I aggregated data from multiple years to try and determine just what that usage had been, kind of on
Okay.
a more long-term basis. And
Well, like another
adjustments.
line 386, it says no increase in the budget, which is 67,500, but the 2024 actual was 22,400, which, and anyway, I just, there's a few little weird places like that. Anyway, small potatoes compared to some things. I just wondered.
This is Rick, and maybe you can educate me, but what the heck is going on with workers' comp? Line 531, a 1,244% increase. That's like, wow.
Which line is that, Rick? I do the workers' comp, so I might be able to explain it to you. Which line was that in?
531, 532.
531, 532, hold on a second, let me take a look. Workers' comp is kind of weird.
Yeah, it sure
Because, well,
is.
basically, what you have with, oh, okay, so it's gone from there, yeah. That is under the buildings and grounds. It's hard to tell because it goes on payroll. And what we're working with is an unaudited payroll. And so when they come in with the audit, I get these other numbers that we may have, for example, had less money, we spent more money on buildings and grounds than what we anticipated. So that payroll went way up. The workers' comp costs would go way up in association with it. So there are factors like that, because we come up with a payroll estimate going in.
Yeah.
And then what they do is our final expenses goes on what we actually spend on payroll. And so, and again, that's like 18 months out when we anticipate what the payroll will be, and we generally just use a percent. We don't try to do a calculated figure, we try to put in an inflation rate. So some years it can come out very, very different.
Well, I thought we must have gotten a new workers' comp commission or something that
No.
we're no longer handling the Bruins, so they decided to handle us.
No, it's figuring the workers' comp is a real crapshoot,
Yeah.
so.
You look at
All right.
194, 195, there's another, it's a workers' comp again. That one is less percent, but it goes from $2,400 to 13,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very weird.
Explain.
I wish I could do a better job of anticipating that. In some years, I actually do a fairly good job, but other years, I'm just way, way off.
You'd be worth your weight in gold if you
Yeah,
could do that.
so, it's definitely, kind of throwing darts.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think overall, Jeff and Wendy and everyone, when you look at the total number that we spend on workers' comp, it actually comes out fairly good, but where we thought we were gonna spend it may not work.
Well, this is Rick, and against a fully funded CIP, I think it's a pretty darn good looking budget.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I think the department heads did a great job of really going in and taking a look and saying, what do we need to do the job, but what is the most cost-effective way to do it? And I think they're all very excited about the CIP. We've been working at it now about 12 years now, and I think we finally reached the point where we're ready to make that plunge. And so hopefully the town will support us as well. Phil waves high. Is that an agreement, Phil?
Well, it's been a lot of work, and I believe, from looking at the numbers when it wasn't fully funded, only and brought questions from citizens. Where the numbers, and part of it was in the budget, part of it was in the CIP, there wasn't the transparency I think people were looking for, and hopefully this will get that in the actual budgets. That's what I'm assuming you're at in your anticipation, as you say, that you're trying to make right.
Yeah, exactly.
great. Okay. Anybody see anything else they want to talk about in that budget? Okay, very good. Thank you, guys. This is pretty smooth.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, other business. I have one more thing I forgot about. Brian, are you still there?
Yes.
Are there any plans to go enter discussions with the DOT about raising our roads by the various coves?
I haven't heard anything out of DOT talking about the potential for raising those roads along in coves. I think that I know which coves in particular you're talking about.
Yeah.
I
mean, we may need to start that conversation with them because I think Mother Nature was just clearing her throat here.
Yeah. I've looked at some of those areas for years, even before I started doing this job, and
yeah,
the solutions are not easy in many of them.
That's right.
We have a lot of conversation. It'll take some time, but I think it's the right trajectory.
All right. Well, that's all I have. Anybody else?
Just one thing, Jeff, and everyone, Rick was here and is able to sign the warrants, but I'm gonna need at least two of you to come in, hopefully tomorrow and sign so that we can pay off our bills. That would be good.
I can go by tomorrow.
I can too.
Good. That would
Super
give
easy.
us, Thank you, that would give us a quorum and we can get our checks out. So I thought this meeting went pretty well. I thought.
Yeah.
I may never come in again.
No,
I know, now that we have the clockwise scheme, right?
Oh,
it's
I-
much better in person.
I actually wanted to come, but a couple of people persuaded me that I shouldn't, but
We've got minutes.
By
for
saying, are
sign.
you nuts?
I like driving this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But it's good though, when we get a night like this, that we do have the capability of being able to continue to move things along, which is good, so we don't
It
fall
is.
behind.
yeah.
I do wonder, how we will handle or how we would handle a more lively public discussion. And because I've been in Zoom meetings that are a little unwieldy. It's difficult. People don't all know how to use the technology to raise their hands or bother, and it can be a challenge. But this is great.
Happen often, so.
All right, are we ready for the warrants?
Mhm.
Here we go. Approval and signature, town invoice AP 2444 in the amount of $414,556.01.
Martha, I move approval and signature.
Rick
Jeff.
seconds.
Okay, all in favor?
Rick says aye.
Jeff Wood says aye.
John McCauley says aye.
Wendy Littlefield says aye.
Martha Dudman says aye.
Okay, thank you. Approval and signature, treasurer's payroll, state fees and payroll benefits, AP 2442, AP 2443, PR, town payroll PR 2416, and PR 2417 in the amount of $322,368.22.
Martha moves approval.
Rick seconds.
Great. All in favor?
Rick says aye.
Jeff Wood says aye.
John McCauley says aye.
Wendy Littlefield's going to abstain.
Martha Dudman says aye.
Great. Acknowledgement, treasurer's town voided disbursements and school board AP payroll. School invoice AP 7, school payroll PR 14, voided disbursements V 2404 for a total of $154,089.88.
Rick
Jeff
moves
Wood,
acknowledgement.
acknowledgement.
Rick seconds.
Great. All in favor?
Rick says aye.
Jeff Wood says aye.
John McCauley says aye.
Wendy Littlefield says aye.
Martha Dudman says aye.
Hey, thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Moves adjourned.
Second.
Second, Wendy.
All in favor?
Says aye.
Aye.
John
Jeff says
McCauley says aye.
Wendy
aye,
says
aye.
aye.
Martha says aye.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Yeah.